Nice to meet you both. Emma, I'm going to start with you. I mean, I think about, as a young queer person, to get a chance to be a part of a film like this, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, it was a huge honor, and it's something that really drew me to the script was, the complexities of what it explores. And I really felt, as we've been talking about today a lot, is how much it resonates still today, the progress that there is still to be made. And the film's a really strong reminder of the places we've been and everything that people have fought for to get to the place where we are today, where people are able to have more freedom and live how they want to live, but also how much progress there is still to make.
Thank you for that. David, I was speaking with Michael, of course, the director. He told me that he knew that you would be the perfect fit for Emma and Harry. He knew that it would be the perfect dream, the three of you together. What's your reaction to that?
Oh, I'm chuffed. Yeah.
What was it like when you think about, young stars of today, Emma and Harry, you can't get much more exciting than that. What was it like to get to share this super special experience with the two of them?
Oh yeah, it was really special, yeah. Michael created a wonderful space for the three of us to bond and create a chemistry over a 3-week rehearsal period, and I think that proved invaluable when we came to shoot the film.
Emma, what do you hope that, because I do think it's so interesting that it really helps you realize that it really wasn't that long ago where you could be imprisoned just for being who you are, being gay, being queer. What do you hope that young people, when they go to see this, what do you want them to take away from it?
I hope that it just inspires conversations about, how recent that was, and also how fragile our world is now that we live in. A lot of the stuff that's happening in the US with censorship of queer literature and the Don't Say Gay ban, and these are very real things that a lot of people are living through, and that's not to mention the countless places in the world where people still cannot live authentically. And I hope that it inspires those conversations.
No, thank you for sharing that, especially on the queer literature. We're doing so much work to get that to stop. David, can you think, when we think about representation and in film, if you were, had a film like this when you were younger and growing up and figuring out who you are, what do you think that would have meant to you?
Oh gosh. I think hopefully we're living through the beginning of a very exciting time in terms of queer stories in television and film. So I think, if I was a young lad watching, It's a Sin, Heartstopper, Pose, My Policeman, of course it would have had a great impact on me as a young person. And there's so many more people now for young people to find inspiring, regardless of whether you're queer or not, especially in Britain, who are incredibly ambitious and talented and eloquent, like Tom Daley or Nicola Adams or Bimini Bon Boulash or Paris Lees. There's lots of people to celebrate.
Absolutely. Emma, for you, can you mentioned that queer literature, queer art is so important for especially young people to have access to. What would it have been for you to see something like this when you were, you're still very young, but when you were much younger?
Yeah, I think it's about representation, right? And seeing people who you can relate to and experiences that you can relate to, seeing that on screen. I feel like as a kid, I was always looking for myself, or pieces of myself in films and TV, and I lived very much in imaginary places, because in fiction, especially magic and those kingdoms and that kind of thing, binaries don't exist in the same way that they do in real books and books about real life and films and TV about real life. And I think that it's so nice now that we have films like this, or David said, Heartstopper is so good. I love that show so much.
Yeah.
I think it's such a gift for people now to be able to, turn on Netflix and be confronted with people who they recognize themselves in and who they can learn from and see their experience reflected back at them. I think it's so important and so powerful.
It's such a beautiful film. I would love to hear why it spoke to you and why you wanted to be a part of it.
I was really interested in the dynamic of three people who meet when they're young in the 1950s in Britain. and the circumstances that brought them together and drove them apart. So they're brought together, I think, broadly speaking, by love and torn apart by prejudice. And so that prompted me to start looking at, or revising, if you like, the history surrounding the characters at that time. And of course, what was happening in Britain at that time was appalling. There was so many arrests in terms of the police arresting gay men, particularly in this country, which brought about the Wolfenden Report. And so I started to look at it from that point of view. Also in 1999, when we meet the characters again, we've got Section 28 happening in the UK. So it makes you, even though you kind of know it academically, it makes you understand the timelines and how painfully slow progression is in terms of legislation and in terms of reversing attitudes and educating all of us. And so those elements were really interesting, but the dynamic of the price of those actions for all three of the characters, who I guess you could say are victims of their time, and how that's taken through the 4 decades before we meet them again. All of those elements were fascinating to me.
And, I was thinking when it comes to, big stars, Emma Corrin, Harry Styles, I know, you're on the other side of time when it comes to the storylines. Did you at all get to kind of share in that experience with them and kind of just, have any fun moments with them?
We couldn't meet in person because we had COVID safety protocols in place because of, 2021 we shot it. And so we could technically meet, and we did physically meet eventually, and that was really lovely. But we used technology basically, but the younger cohorts shot the 1950s stuff first, so I was really fortunate. I had some material that Emma had shot that I could look at, which was really useful. And we have met since, but not a great deal, but they're amazing and really brilliant to be around.
Yeah, I was speaking to Michael, and he was saying it was important for him to, thinking about it as young as they are, and then everyone else, that it really wasn't that long ago in history that this was happening, where a gay man or, a woman could go to jail, could be imprisoned for this. I mean, what's your reaction to that when you look back and open up the history books and see that, it really wasn't that long ago?
No, I mean, it's kind of, this is what I'm saying, when you start to look at the time frame, and particularly as you get older, like you think when you're young, time does weird stuff, but as you get older, you understand that actually, it's scarily close. And I think it definitely galvanizes me not to take my foot off the pedal.
Yeah, and I have to, of course, bring up Rupert Everett. You share a lot of time with him. That experience must have been wonderful, to kind of such important scenes and emotional scenes. But what was that like for you?
Brilliant. I love Rupert. I've loved him for years. I haven't worked with him before. I have enjoyed his films as an actor. I've enjoyed his books as a writer. I've enjoyed him as a director, in fact, too, because of course the Oscar Wilde picture was great. So it was a privilege. And I know people say that all the time. It's like one of those key phrases, but I mean it, because he has a brilliant mind, and that mind coupled with his experience is a really potent thing. And he also has originality of thought. And particularly now, I think that is fantastic. There's a lot of pressure to think a certain way, and he's not afraid. He has a great mind, and I think he's fantastic.
This film, so much to talk about, I have so little time, but I know that you felt a personal connection to this, and I would love for you to explain that, because I know it was an important story for you to tell.
Well, I was born into the England that is unfortunately portrayed at the beginning of this film in the 1950s. I was born in the early 60s, and the law didn't change until I was young. But what carried on long after the law change was a lot of prejudice, and I'm very proud, obviously, to be part of a community that's made incredible advances over 40 years, but I do feel it's quite fragile again at the moment, if I'm honest. I think the whole Roe v. Wade verdict in America, we know that that's led to some justices saying, let's now turn to gay marriage. We know that gay marriage is on an agenda here in the UK in some quarters. I just feel it's vulnerable again, and it's a very personal journey for me in that respect. I mean, I want to be able to get to as many young people as possible, which, by the way, I think is going to be possible when you cast Emma Corrin and Harry Styles in your movie. It means that you're going to get a lot of, hopefully, young people from their fan base, and the young, for me personally, the young are the least prejudiced generation ever born at the moment, and I want them to see what it was like living in a time where you couldn't be who you were, where you went to jail for being true to yourself, and I want them to become ambassadors for never going back there, for keeping moving forward. And that's another big part of making this movie. You don't want to play this movie to just a few people. You want to play it to as many people as possible and be part of a bigger debate.
You know, you mentioned Emma and Harry. You know, this is your second film. Was it everything you thought it would be, working with giant, like you said, young stars like Emma and Harry?
Yeah, I mean, I've been very, very fortunate, and I might even say lucky, in my entire career to have worked with some of the most incredible actors at the absolute peak of their game throughout. And this was no exception. I tend not, as a result of that, to get fazed by their fame. I actually, because it won't come as a surprise that they are as vulnerable as anybody else, and that they are, you know, they're people who are in need of direction and help, and we're all in it together. And it's a very, very collaborative process. We could not have wished for three people to want to tell this story more than they did. And they were up for everything. We were very lucky to have quite a long rehearsal period, so we were able to discuss everything. We were able to talk about everything that you see in the movie in advance and really create a world together. So by the time we came to shoot it, we knew what we wanted to do. And that was exciting.
It is exciting. I mean, and also you mentioned David. Obviously, I would imagine that this film for him was especially impactful to be a part of as well. What were some of the conversations that you and David had about kind of looking at how recent it was, like you said, that you could have gone to jail just for being a gay man?
Well, Patrick, who is the only character in the film who is at home with his sexuality, I was keen both the actors who played Patrick to be able to bring some personal experience to that, and both David Dawson and Rupert Everett could and did, and it was exciting to have them in a room talking with me about what we could achieve with this film in the way we told the story. And David is somebody I've worked with before. He's the most wonderful collaborator. I knew he would, because I've worked with him before, I knew he would be great with Harry and Emma. So that was a key thing for me in terms of bringing that trio together. And I wasn't disappointed. And I think it is a big moment for him, this.
Well, Michael, congrats on the film. Thank you so much for the time.